question to the audience. Who from you have heard about OpenAR Cloud? Hands up. Ooh, you see?
Oh, word gets around fast.
Yeah, perfect.
Well, there you go.
Okay, so the intro was already, so no needed. What is your connection to the OpenAR Cloud? Just go around. What are your roles?
Founding member.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm the managing director. I'm secretary of OpenAR Cloud, and very excited to use it in my own company's processes once we get it off the ground a little more.
So I'm a little bit the odd man out here because we have an enterprise AR cloud, but I'm very excited to learn about, with these guys. I would like to understand how maybe we can apply our technology to it and how perhaps we can benefit from this concept as well.
And I'm a champion.
Oh, but you are, of course. So the current state is you already are using it. What about the others? What is the current state of the OpenAR Cloud?
I can. It is not there in the end user's hands really. I think it's just around the corner. A few months from now, I think we will see the first commercial examples. I cannot guarantee that this will happen, but yeah, you're in a niche market and doing pioneering work there, so it's becoming very real. And I think it's cool that we are actually doing this ethical thing before the tech sector just does its thing and maybe be mindless about it. So it's a good position to be here now, just before it is about to hit the mainstream.
You already mentioned one important thing, Google. And what is the common understanding of the open or AR cloud? I mean, it could be as similar as, for example, ML and Microsoft. The definition, the common understanding that we all talk about the same.
When you think about AR clouds in general, I think the core thing is that you have representations of the real physical world, real physical places, and you use that for all sorts of things. So it could be for localization services, but it could also be for location-based contents and location-based apps. So it's a wide spectrum of things, but the core is the base map, like the reality that is mirrored in the cloud.
Yeah.
If I may. So the AR cloud, which I assume most of you already know, just briefly, at its most basic is spatial data about the real world and the AR experiences that we marry together with that data. Now what the OpenAR Cloud is, it's the subset of AR cloud infrastructure that is committed to principles of openness, of privacy, of respect, really of the onus with building an AR cloud data set is there's quite a lot of potentially private information that goes along with it. And so, at least at my company, at UAR, as we started building these data sets, we very quickly realized that there was a lot of compliance and privacy issues, and that this was such a big problem, it wasn't something we wanted to solve alone. And so I think that's a good starting point to
add to that. I'd like to add to Colin's comment. I think that we don't really have one definition that has been agreed on by everyone in the universe that can use these technologies, and the onus is on those who see their future involved in spatial data and experiences to, to collaborate. And the word open in front of it, I think, is a sign that interoperability is an essential part, both for the authors of AR experiences to be able to write once and then have those experiences be available on many platforms, as well as for the users of augmented reality and virtual reality, but to have the choice for the users to have the choice of the device that they want, the kinds of experiences that they want, and to be able to have that more simply than we have in the current model.
Okay, so really total openness, not depending on any kind of ecosystem, not bound on any products. It should really be open for the users, for the content generators, for everyone like this.
Open doesn't mean free, but yes,
I've
open
not said free.
in the sense of interoperable.
Okay.
Open
I
is a
think-
philosophy, and for different partners, it will mean different things.
Sure.
As AR Cloud matures, you will start to see particular standards emerge and particular levels of openness that participants may commit to.
I think the biggest question, for me at least, is what should this common like denominator be between like the different providers? Is it a set of, let's say, spatial data only? So like, let's say a topology, let's say the corner of the stage, for example, right? Is it just a topology that is kind of unison in all services that you can say, okay, I attach something there? Is that enough of a uniqueness in order to recognize something, or is it a subset of certain optical feature points? But then there you have the problem of different IP and different localization methods that are problematic because, for example, our company, we have a lot of IP regarding how we localize, what features we extract to actually enable the localization. This we would not share with others. So what should this common denominator be in between different providers? This is something that is
Yeah, I can-
question still.
Yeah, I can say like we at Norkart, where I have my day job, we're doing like open R&D. So we're experimenting. We have some people at the university who is trying out machine learning concepts on the smartphone and trying to match that with the previous observations of detected objects. And there's probably like 1 million approaches to this, and that is things that could be an open source project, but it could very much be a commercial service. I think that's not where that's not the critical part to have open, the way you do that. But it's if you have somebody writing an app with the 6D API or UAR's API, and they place some content in the world. So they should be able to use. I could use a Magic Leap goggle, and a friend could use an Android phone, and we should be able to get an agreement of where in the real world this object is. So that's where the interoperability comes in.
I think we're dancing around something here, which is there is no universal visual browser today. And there are many different proprietary approaches to localizing devices. And so it's unlikely that what OpenAR Cloud is able to produce this year is going to be a shared visual solution. But what we could do is something a little more humble. We could have a shared indexing standard where we list with a more naive indication like GPS coordinates where content is located. How you're able to consume that content and how you localize with greater precision is very much still proprietary territory. And I think as those proprietary technologies become more commodity, we'll see more companies willing to come together on shared standards. But for now, I think just getting started and having agreement on very basic high-level things, even if we've got proprietary technology that we don't want to open source, there's still a lot of room for cooperation in that domain.
In the same way that there's Safari, Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, I think we'll have a variety of different ways of accessing the content, localizing in this case. The standards that we're talking about are, you know, where, like Darius was saying, like where is the thing? How do you define the semantics for how it's accessed and consistent across those different browsers?
Okay, so now we talked a lot about this cross connectivity. What about real use cases? Something where we really can catch something and talk about this.
Yeah, I think Urienbar, I said in a press conference, Urienbar, he used to often says that AR gives us superpowers. AR Cloud, which is a term coined by Urienbar, I believe sincerely it will give you 100 times as much superpowers. and it will enable 1,000 times as many use cases. I've had this since I did a digital twin back in 1995. I've always felt that you need to be able to connect the real world with the virtual, and that's everything I've been dreaming of regarding AR and XR since then has always been that you need this connection.
I think that I completely agree that it's difficult to summarize the use cases without leaving some of them out. We just don't have time to talk about all of the use cases. However, in my mind, the use cases divide generally quite quickly into those that are indoor and outdoor. There's also another divide quite quickly that is around, am I working? Am I in the workplace, or am I in my private life in a personal, am I acting in a personal private role? So I think a lot of it is the use cases, the discussion of use cases are in the person's mind and their particular place on the skin of the planet.
So, for example, if I may speak about some use cases that we are currently developing with for enterprise, because this is again a very open field. These things are so new that even enterprise customers are like, okay, what does AR Cloud do? Right? This is still super new, and the most primitive use case that people want is like localization. So we leave the content and the AR content out of it and just do the pure localization in terms of 3D space and orientation. So that's one.
So indoor navigation, for example.
Any indoor.
Navigation, yes, that's one part, yes. And the second one, which is basically related to it, is this digital twin creation, basically. So not really concentrating on the content, but basically on this perpetual scan of an environment, a manufacturing hall, etc., to actually, to manage processes like this better. And the third one is basically point cloud manipulation. For example, if I would scan, let's say, this room or a factory hall, some companies want to insert their own CAD models into it to show their customers, for example. For them in the actual manufacturing hall, hold up their phone, and they would see the machine exactly where it will be in the future to kind of minimize the mistakes that are generated and basically understand, in a previous session, okay, I really have to change this building part. Let's say I have to change the cabling to minimize your work, actually. So
now you've said something important. Before it was the digital twin. Digital twin is kind of putting the real stuff into a virtual environment to have it duplicated. By setting up even a future outlook, so simulation is a totally new quality. Do you agree to this? Is this maybe something we could make money with?
Yes. So basically, it's exactly about this, because with the constant scanning of the digital twin, what we create is this, semantics surrounding this. So you not only do a complete new scan with complete new localizations and mapping, like the pure mapping part of it, but with the map, you always have connotated some semantic information, like, for example, where's a person, where's a window, where's a door, because, for example, in the real estate business, people want to not only scan their facilities, but they want to understand, okay, where's a window, where's a door, where are steps, right? These things have to be extracted from the visuals in order to label not only the position data, but also the meaning towards it. So that's yet something else that the AR Cloud can be very, very helpful with, to connect it with meaning.
So
I'll jump in. One of the use cases that we're currently doing a pilot on has to do with fulfillment centers and warehousing. So there's these pick and pack individuals that go through a warehouse, and they essentially have an order list of all the things as they go through the aisles. They pick this and put it in the cart and repeat, so on and so forth. Some of them are for wholesalers, and they also service e-commerce companies. So there's a mishmash of products all over the place. One of the key problems that we feel like we can help them solve is that rather than the picker looking at the list and trying to find the barcode and scanning around all that time, looking around and trying to find it, is literally just point them exactly to where it is in that space, give them an XYZ coordinate, so they're literally just going up to it, grabbing it to the next, to the next. So far we found, just with kind of a very unscientific proof of concept that we can double their speed, which is, in this case, it's 50% of their workforce. So if we can double their speed for 50% of their workforce, think about the impact that it's going to have on their, efficiencies. That's a specific use case. I think also just kind of taking a step back, in the same way that that the internet has kind of made a superpower. So way back in the day, you'd have a question: who was that actor in that Oscar-winning movie from 1978? And people just kind of look at each other with blank stares. Nobody had an answer. Come here we have the internet. You can answer that question like that. With the AR cloud, when you're talking about something that's local, where's the exit? Where's the train station? Before we came over here, we were having lunch and trying to find each other. And we're like, where are you? That fundamental question of where, once everything's connected and digitized and personalized and contextual to you in the place that you are, it'll enable instant answering those questions.
Could I
Sure.
add to Stephen's comment?
It's a democracy here.
No, it's a panel. It's your panel. But I think that Stephen's example is I can add to that by saying that every person, place, and thing in the physical world can be the source of AR experiences. In other words, can be a trigger for an AR experience. And today, the technologies that we have permit only a very limited set of experiences. Whereas I think the next generation, and partly what we're talking about now, is that people will be able to attach new digital assets to a specific target, and there may be multiple digital assets associated with any person, place, or thing. But I, as a user, could then be setting my own preferences, and the AR the technology in the cloud would only bring to me those digital assets that I personally wanted. And that's done through basically a continuous automatic search based on context. And it's just context, context, context.
Yeah. I think we could probably go on like all day and all night in the next few months talking about specific use cases. Like in general, we're taking like our digital lives out from this little flat square and into the entire world, and it's going to have a huge implication on the economy and on the culture and on ethical sides. So we
How on ethical sides? Please explain.
The privacy thing, that's the major issue, because you can imagine you have sensor streams real time from millions of people, billions of people coming into perhaps a government entity or a large corporation, and you can imagine if they have the rich spatial context of the public space or the private space they are, and the details of how they're moving in what they're looking at, and the people around them, how they, who they are, and what they are doing, and how they're behaving, what mental state they are. So you want, like in China, they are trying to track each, in the province in China, they're tracking each individual citizen continuously everywhere they go. It's a horror story in real life playing out, and we don't want that. So OpenAI Cloud is making a stance. We do not want that. We will not accept that.
How do you prevent this flip side?
So we have to be very careful about how we design this technology. So we put privacy as a fundamental principle, and then we look at how we build like a positioning service. So it would be better for privacy if less goes up to the cloud. If you are less reliant on trusting the provider. So if you can do more on the device or more in the edge computing. If you have inside a facility, you have a computer, and that does a lot of the spatial computing. That is better than having to trust a large IT giant. And if you are going to do that, then you need very robust safety protocols. You have to have super advanced encryption. I think Versus is like the perfect Maybe you can
Yeah, I was
opinion
going
on that.
to chime in. I was going to say that there are a number of companies that are working on the self-sovereign identity problem. There's also a foundation, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, aptly named, that Microsoft is a supporter of, which I think is a big win. And there's quite a few companies that are on board with that. And so their model is to flip the data ownership so that you have a master account. And instead of you signing up for all these other web services and you're signing their terms of service and they own your data, you own your data, and it's the reverse, where you're allowing permissions for what you want to expose. You're going to expose different information, just like you do on social networks, to your friends and your peers, your colleagues on LinkedIn, versus at the doctor's office or driver DMV or what have you. So, or at the airport for that matter. So, I think that's going to be an important component. And to answer the question in terms of how do we enable that type of world, is to support the companies that believe in that as a key part of the puzzle.
And to collaborate not just among augmented reality technologists or technology companies, but to collaborate also with other associations and other thought leaders and perhaps government stipulations and so forth. I think when you see the potential benefits, there are often risks that go with benefits, and people need more, better understanding about how to balance those risks with the benefits.
They need the awareness.
All right, I want to share a problem that we had to solve at YouAR about 4 years ago. At the time, our AR solution was session-based, and we'd pull out a smartphone or an HMD, and the data available to us was what the sensors was giving to us in that session at that time. And we were running into problems with depth perception and occlusion and collision. So from our limited perspective, we would underestimate the length of a bus or something, and so our AR dragon might fly through the side of a bus like a ghost because it didn't understand how deep the object it was looking at. And the way to get around that would be to walk around the entirety of the bus. And that was a pain in the butt, and so very quickly we realized we need to cache this information. And after talking to Ori, we started referring to this information that we were collecting in our servers as AR cloud data. And as we're gathering more and more information, which is an awesome superpower, by the way, because it gives us the power of multiple perspectives that we can share amongst many devices, so that I can make those assumptions about occlusion and about collision more accurately and ultimately build an experience that's more realistic. But at the same time, it means that I have a 3D scan of maybe someone's bedroom in very intimate detail. And that's a liability that we weren't particularly interested in solving all by ourselves. And so very quickly we started going out and looking for other people who were worried about how can we create a set of policies for who can access what where. What people, place, and things are relevant to me right now. I have my own bedroom. I want to share it with my family and my friends, not the general public. And so that's just AR cloud infrastructure right there. So where does open AR cloud come in? Well, the spatial intelligence that my company has collected is just one small fraction. And maybe we're willing to share that information for other platforms to use. And maybe there's other spatial data vendors who are happy to index and share their data with me in kind. And so what OpenAR Cloud does is it takes that perspective that right now is limited to the data that I've collected in my platform, and it opens it up to any other platforms that want to participate in such a way so that we can pool our data and make it available to the public, and it helps us with discovery, issues of discovery.
Yeah, while maintaining the control, while letting the users be in control over the data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're
That's
in
the
Europe
key.
right
That's
now,
the key.
GDPR, right to be forgotten. It's very important that if I take a 3D scan of my bedroom and submit it up to an AR cloud service, maybe a few years later I want to take that information back down, and I, at least in this country, have a right to have that information taken down. And so we need to determine a standard way to do that, and an efficient way to do that. I don't want to go to a dozen different social media toys I've played with and individually request my information taken down. I would prefer that that policy be set once in a central place that a lot of different platforms could take advantage of. These are the spatial rules that I feel safe with for my private data, and I want to broadcast that intent to anyone. And who I choose to do business with maybe is the subset of AR cloud platforms that decide to go open and observe these philosophies of decentralization, of respecting privacy, of complying with local legislation. And I think that's what distinguishes open AR cloud infrastructure from the larger set that it belongs to of all AR cloud.
Yeah, we don't know the policies they are pursuing. We don't know if they're taking care of our privacy.
So this is a huge challenge. Are there any other challenges that we can talk about right now that?
Well,
or
this
so
is
many?
this is a
Or
dev
biggest challenge.
this is a like a developer thing. So there's we're in the early phase of this. It's very the first primitive examples of this technology. So there's going to be R&D for ages, like probably a few decades before this is starting to get perfected. So it's a good idea to encourage open innovation in the field. And Norkart is going to put some stuff out on the OpenAI Cloud GitHub in not too long. We have a visualization tool that you can use when you're developing an AR Cloud localization service, and you want to visualize how it is performing. And that's just an open source tool that everyone can use. And we intend to publish that in not too long.
I think that.
In the context of a developer track, and you know who is in the audience here, I think this is a really important question, Jay. That what are the tools that a developer can use to take advantage of what we're talking about? And right now, I think that there's a few small authoring environments that have an understanding of this. They're usually provided as sample software, or they are provided for testing, and exactly what Jan-Erik said. But for this to be successful, I think that the authoring tools will not only be used by software engineers, but need to be put in the hands of common people, not unlike the tools that we have for publishing web content. And this is, as Jan-Erik said, quite a long ways, but it's something that if people understand the target, then we can get closer to it and a better understanding of the features of a particular product.
Yeah, regarding content, I have this thought in my head. Like 10 years from now, maybe my kid is 11 years now. He's dating. Maybe he has a girlfriend and he wants to impress her. Maybe so he goes to a public space that he really it could be a park or something, and the entire world is his canvas. And without him being a developer, although I would like him to be, he could just use the tools seamlessly. He could create artworks in place, and they could be interactive, and they could be beautiful. And he could lead his girlfriend through an experience that he has created for her. And in the end of this experience is a crescendo of art that he has created, just with no effort, of course effort, but with no technical need for technical skills.
Okay, what I want to say now is totally unromantic, so this is like a really harsh cut, but I want to actually comment on what Colin said regarding the bedroom scanning, which may relate to what you just said. But
I wanted to mention, but it was kind of rude, so I skipped it.
we made a full loop. Okay, so what I want to say is basically the OpenAI Cloud has to kind of have like a rule set on what semantic segmentations you can gather from the scans. I think this is something that, because, okay, positional data, localization, one.
Yeah.
Then what else? Is it text data? Is it recognition with ORCs? And that's one. Or do you maybe have to have a standard where you have machine learning models that in the backend eradicate the images of people? This is what we do right now, for example. When we scan warehouses, we detect people frame by frame and cut them out.
Yeah, I'm very heartened by
that's
this.
like
Thumbs up.
Thank you.
You
So
come join
that's
us.
something we have to do.
You're almost one of us now.
Very close.
You know, I look forward to the day that OpenAR Cloud can be that developed. I think we have more humble goals before we'll get to the level of using machine learning to digitally remove sensitive information from data sets. But I think for now, if we can just identify some principles and maybe come up with a common, naive AR Cloud index of content, that would already be very useful and is a more tangible, immediate goal than an industry standard anonymization process or something like that. All very admirable stuff that I hope to see in the future, but we got to start somewhere.
It's quite expensive also to do so, because you really computationally you have to do it frame by frame. This is very costly. So I'm not sure maybe that for the OpenAR Cloud this might be too expensive. I don't know.
It might not be as far in the future as you know. Perception is not like a true representation of reality. It's what you are focusing on. And if you train a neural net model to look for inanimate objects that are not sensitive, that is what the neural net is going to see. And you can do that today. We train such nets in our the Norkart R&D, and we didn't look for persons. We looked for trash bins and light poles and stuff like that. And that if you take that approach, you get some sort of instant protection of privacy without a huge effort, without huge advances in machine learning.
It's really easy to take for granted how sophisticated and robust our experience, our digital experience is today with e-commerce and social media and mobile and all that stuff. But for those of you who've been around long enough, I mean, there was obviously a time where web pages, just to load a picture took like a minute, 3 minutes. It's just agonizing. It was terrible. It was super small, low resolution, ugly design. That's 20 years in the making, 25 years in the making. AR Cloud is a continuum, and it's going to, similarly, I think, be a multi-decade evolution. We're going to see things happen, faster. I mean, there's a lot of incredible technology already, but having them kind of converge in the right way and show the fruits of their compound effect is going to take many, many years.
So what about technological influences? What kind of technology would you need right now in this minute to accelerate your or our all OpenAR Cloud?
Yeah. Okay. You
Money.
Come on,
money. Okay.
Oh, money's a technology.
Yeah.
One of the oldest technologies.
So I have this thing where I compare XR is the way that humans experience the world, but IoT is the way that machines experience the world. So this AR Cloud, even though it's AR augmented reality for humans, there's this whole, like, the content that we're accessing, the content can exist whether or not we're seeing it. And I think that's one of the fundamental layers that we can actively work on now, is harnessing all this data that currently exists in the world and making sense out of it. You throw some AI at that to do the pattern recognition and find some value that bubbles to the surface. The thing is that that's a prerequisite anyway, because right now there's not a tremendous daily value for us to put on a headset. Never mind the fact that our AR experience right now are siloed from one another, and it's not a continuum. But that starting point of providing value and answering the question, why should I put the headset on, or look through my device, is content. And I think if we can, one, automate the generation of that content through combining data and existing data sources, and two, make it easy for people to generate content.
Yeah, I think that this is your last point about reducing the barriers to content creation, and I think some of that is going to be through automation. Some of it is going to be manual, artistic, perhaps. But to the point about automation, I think this is at the core of how machines see the world, and metaphorically, and perhaps we're going to be able to attach, or the digital assets will be attached because there's a semantic language in the asset So somewhat like what you're saying, I recognize that this was a machine from this manufacturer, and this is the model of machine. I have seen, the cloud has seen that before, and there's an automatic association created. And I think that's a very, very powerful concept and a technology that needs to be furthered.
That's exactly the problem that we are currently struggling. I mean, we're doing it now, but it's about this labeling of content. So in a retail store, for example, you can create an AR cloud of a retail store, localize at any distance, and this is what we do. But the problem is, what about the content? There are 25,000 items in the store. So now we come along, and what we do is, alongside the scanning and the scanning process and creating the AR cloud, we read automatically certain labels, which then in the back end is connected to the CMS that then label the content in a certain framework. Like, let's say you scan a section with MP3 players, you create the AR cloud, we read out the text, and at the same time then it is kind of funneled through an interface that displays the MP3 interface, like what's the most expensive one, what's the most featured one, etc. So a sort of automated approach, and this is something we are currently discussing with a retailer.
Awesome.
Or instead of automated process, this could be also an entry point for the audience to get involved, to label it manually, to support you.
Manually,
what other kind of support could we imagine from the audience? Beside of money. No, don't
join
talk
us.
about money.
Join us as a volunteer.
Yeah,
We are actively seeking members right now. Come next year, we will start charging for membership, but any company, any individual that wants to join OpenAR Cloud, visit our website today. We're forming working groups right now. We're breaking off into particular domains so that the companies that care about those domains, about what is a privacy contract going to look like in a common indexed way that lots of different apps can access, what AR point cloud standards, if any, might emerge. That might be a point of contention for a while, but I think eventually a commodity will emerge and we might agree on a standard there. But yeah, get involved in a non-monetary way. Get involved with your brain trust.
That's the most important. We're just a few people now. We have 16 founding partners, and people are actually signing up now. So we have probably 20 or so members signed up, founding members. But the challenges are huge. So we cannot do this with the little team we have now, even though they are really truly awesome people. But yeah, join now or be left behind.
One of our first initiatives is we're trying to determine what a shared index could look like, some sort of DNS of AR content. There is nothing for Google to index to know what all the AR content is out there. All the spatial data that's available, all the AR experiences pinned to that spatial data. It all lives in walled gardens right now. And so I think the platforms that recognize that and try to expose their content to a greater audience are going to win. We all heard, anyone who heard the DigiCapital keynote this morning, one of the things he said was the average user installs 0 new apps each month. And so I think that's a huge barrier to entry for discovering AR content. And so personally, I would love to list the AR experiences that I have available in a way that is freely queryable. And then maybe it will take a proprietary app to open up some of those experiences, but if we can still list this information in a shared way, that is immensely valuable. Even if you have to tag it with an intent that launches you into a siloed app to actually open up the experience, even being able to discover it, immensely useful and not something that exists today in a shared open way.
Small incremental steps can have huge implications down the road. So it's unleashing that kind of small little thing is unleashing way more things in the future.
Do we have any further questions from the audience? Is there anything you want to have? Okay.
Appreciate kind of where you're going with this, but it feels like we're fighting a massive tide from Google, Facebook, and to some extent Apple, right? They've made their businesses from owning our data. They have video, audio, imagery, they have location data in all of their services. I mean, are we not going to have to basically follow their lead? Whatever they put into AR Core, AR Kit, they're putting sensors, additional sensors into mobile devices. Are we not just going to be pulled along and be forced to use their standards and their policies around?
There's definitely that risk,
The
you
AR
know, that it goes the wrong way. But we're like in the middle of tech backlash, where the governments are attacking the tech giants and people are cutting their Facebook and social media accounts. So I think there's going to be a competitive advantage to respecting the privacy and freedom and dignity of the users. And there's this huge moment of distributed computing in distributed blockchains and similar technologies that are fighting against this status quo. So maybe the position of the IT giants is not as robust, and they probably know this. And I think, like deep in their hearts, the leaders of those corporations and employees working there, they want to do the right thing.
I think part of our purpose is to encourage these big companies to join us and be thought leaders in a standard that will be a little more robust than what exists today. I think that the Cambridge Analytica scandal of last year demonstrated for us just how important it is that we improve the way that industry handles private data. And I know, for instance, Google last year paid record fines for holding data that they weren't supposed to, billions of dollars they had to pay in fines. And so I think there's actually profit motive for a lot of larger organizations to really embrace a philosophy of privacy and compliance that respects the privacy and the dignity of the individual and of the regional authorities that they have to work with as well.
And I think the profit motive is just emergent from this. For example, if I create with AR Core or something, an AR Cloud, which is local, let's say, I have to be able to access this with an Apple device, with any browser. So in the end, we will have, some visual inertial SLAM-generated point cloud that all of them will agree upon in order to share their application and their content. It has to be. If not, it wouldn't make sense, I think.
Yeah, you can't have Google's version of the Air Cloud and then Apple's version and Amazon or Facebook, because then it's just having a bunch of intranets as opposed to one seamless one. So I think that it's not going to be a significant debate to have them collaborate and make the pie bigger. The model primarily of the web, the internet, is that try to carve out the biggest piece of the pie. And I think to Colin's point, like the folks that I've talked to in those types of companies, like they don't really want to own the data. They're just kind of slaves to the business model.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point, Stephen, about the business model having been driven heavily by search and advertising on those results. And the opportunity here is also to explore different business models than we have today in the web. And this is incumbent upon on everybody to do that. I think that the decentralization, which was brought up, is also massively important for AR, because I don't need to know about the data that's on the other side of town. I actually need rapid access and rapid high performance
5G
in the assets that are in my proximity. And that's kind of the opposite end of a spectrum with respect to the way web pages work today, right?
Yeah, it's a fresh start. This like entire thing is a fresh start. I think it should be.
But
very different.
The central issue that was mentioned is away from these silos, away from these silo thinking business models. Yeah. It's more into this collaboration. And this, I think, or I'm very sure about, one of the most future-proof ideas, collaboration, cooperation. Any more questions? Oh, ha.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. It's great. Are you familiar with the OpenXR standards work that's being done by the Kronos Group?
We
My
are.
company participates in that.
OpenXR.
Can you speak to that?
I think those efforts are great, and as those standards become more concrete, we may find ourselves endorsing some of them as the OpenAR Cloud group. I will say I'm a little concerned about bringing the baggage of the existing internet along into spatial web or immersive web or whatever, OpenAR Cloud, whatever we end up calling it in the end. You know, CSS and HTML was fundamentally built for two-dimensional spaces where the x-axis and the y-axis work totally differently. Try centering something in CSS in the center of a web page. If there's any web developers
You have
in the room,
Flexbox
they
now, you
this
know?
pain.
Flexbox solves it.
I don't particularly want to bring a legacy printmaking language as the fundamental backbone of
But
AR cloud
OpenXR
experiences.
is in the hardware. OpenXR is an API to the chips, not WebXR. So the OpenAR, I think, is an opportunity to accelerate the performance of the hardware that we have to get closer to the vision that we've been talking about. And in general, the specifications that are developed in Kronos and W3C and other places are the result of vendors defining that lowest common denominator, somewhere that they agree to and that they've tested and can demonstrate. And then they can differentiate and create new value from how they implement the standards. But the OpenXR, I think, is at a quite a lower level. It's hitting the delivery of the experiences. I haven't seen any evidence that they're thinking about the acquisition of content using OpenXR, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I would think it would be. I don't know if they have got this concept of AR cloud yet in their thinking. If it's at least for WebXR that we were commenting on first, they haven't grasped this concept of AR cloud and spatial computing. So they're actually, it seems like they're just putting like an AR game thing that is session based in your browser. And it stops there, and you want to go so much further, but they need to go geospatial.
Hello, my name is Sasha. I have a question because you're talking about AR Cloud to improve the tracking and anything else here.
There you go.
Yeah, and the question is, how do you want to ensure that the reality and the AR Cloud are always synced? Because the reality changes many times, yeah, like the bus or a building is built up again, constructed, yeah. Forum Romanum in Rome maybe stays like every year, yeah. But how do you want to ensure it? Because is it something like peer-to-peer? The people are doing it by themselves, like Photosynth, you know it from Microsoft and Parsons. Great tool, but they stopped it.
I think the goal is a digital twin, but in practice it will be the best available real-time spatial intelligence. And I think that's one of the reasons going open is so important, because maybe the data that my company has in our AR cloud database is not the most up-to-date description of a location, and so there might be an opportunity for some B2B commerce there where I could purchase spatial data from another vendor to augment one of my users' experiences and vice versa. But I will only be able to do that if I have a way of requesting that information through some sort of index. And right now to do that, that means hooking into a bunch of different REST APIs for a bunch of different spatial vendors, and they all have different query languages, and there's a lot of burden that comes along with every new data source you want to incorporate into your pipeline has its own process that comes with it, and I think our purpose is to help reduce that burden.
I also think the irony to that question is that the very same technology that's trying to localize the device in that space can also capture the space and therefore update it.
Yes, that's exactly what we, for example, are doing. This is in an enterprise space where we can basically afford this, because if you think about it, we, for example, have an enterprise AR cloud that is super robust, meaning that if you change 50% of the environment, we still can localize the map, and then we take new images to fill this. The problem is this is very heavy, of course, and this is something that currently may not be able to scale for all applications, especially for B2C applications.
One
Hopefully it will
last
scale.
question, quick.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. Even at these early stages of the OpenAI cloud, how invested are you in blockchain technology for use cases like IP revenue sharing, effort segmentation, or even to call in big fish to invest and make these initiatives happen faster? Thanks.
It's like
He's looking at me.
I told you, blockchain
yes,
will come.
Right. So Versus is a believer that digital ledger technology, be it blockchain or hash graphs or whatever it's going to be, is going to be an important key to the puzzle. Right now, I feel like it's the late 90s .com, like blockchain, everything, and it's an important technology. It still also has a long way to go. It's not very scalable. There's plenty of minds and money that's focused on solving those problems. So we think it's an important piece of the puzzle for trust, and because it's decentralized and it's immutable. How that manifests itself, I think, is not going to be the end-all, be-all. It'll be for the information, for the data that's important. It can go in the blockchain. For everything else that's ephemeral, fleeting, disposable, it can just go into a database.
Okay.